I first saw room 206 on my second day at the Ridgeview Pines Hotel. It wasn't just the rusted-out door plate or the way the hallway lights flickered every time I passed it. There was something heavier, something wrong. No one talked about it, not even in whispers. And the key? It didn't exist. At least, not on the board behind the counter. The maintenance guy, Rick, warned me. That room's off limits. Always has been. Since '94. He didn't say why, and I didn't ask. The way he looked when he said it, like the memory burned behind his eyes, was enough. But I had to ask the manager, out of pure curiosity. Miss Darla's face tightened when I brought it up. Just don't go near it. Trust me, honey. That room's seen enough. Enough of what? That's what kept gnawing at me. You can't just drop a warning like that and expect me to file it away. But I didn't push. Not yet. Still, every time I walked past it, the door seemed to shift. Just slightly. Like it was breathing. Like something inside could sense me. And even though the rest of the hotel was warm and creaky and alive, that wing was cold, dead, like a wound that never healed. I should have walked away that day. I should have quit, but I didn't. And that's when everything began to unravel. The Hollow Pines Lodge wasn't your typical hotel. Nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains, the building was more a relic than a business. Its wood-paneled walls had soaked up decades of whispers, secrets, and the kind of silence that presses on your chest. I was hired as the night manager, just as the first snow of the season began to fall. The locals didn't talk much about the place, but the occasional traveler's wary glance told me this hotel wasn't on anyone's tourist map. The roads leading here were narrow and twisted, surrounded by towering trees that blocked out the sun by mid-afternoon. Winter was brutal. The cold crept through the cracks in the windows, and the wind howled through the pines like a mourning wail. On slow nights, when the few guests had retreated to their rooms, the lodge felt less like a hotel and more like a trap, one I wasn't sure I wanted to escape from. And yet, despite the unease, I needed this job. It was the only thing keeping the rent paid and the shadows at bay. Little did I know that the real nightmare wasn't the mountain cold. It was something waiting, patiently, behind a locked door. From day one, I noticed something odd about room 206. Unlike the other rooms, it was always locked, no matter what time I checked. The maintenance staff swore it was sealed off for structural damage, but that didn't explain the strange sounds I sometimes heard late at night. There were scratching noises, low growls, and even muffled whispers that didn't belong to any guest. Once, I thought I saw a shadow flicker behind the frosted glass of the door, but whenever I tried to investigate, the hallway would suddenly feel colder, and the noises would stop, like the room itself was holding its breath. I asked the other staff about it, but they quickly changed the subject, or muttered warnings not to get involved. The silence around 206 felt like a wall, impenetrable and thick with fear. Something was inside that room, something no one wanted me, or anyone else, to find. And that's when I began to realize I was dealing with more than just an old hotel room. The storm hit faster than anyone expected. Snow piled up overnight, covering the winding mountain roads in a thick, unbroken blanket of white. By morning, the lodge was completely cut off. No cars in or out, no cell signal, and the power flickering like a dying candle. The guests grew restless, the unease in the air thickening with every passing hour. The heating system faltered, leaving the old building colder than I'd ever felt it. Outside, the wind screamed like a banshee, rattling the windows and sending branches slamming against the walls. I checked room 206 again. The door was still locked, but the silence around it felt different, heavier, like the room was waiting for something or someone. As the storm trapped us in this isolated shell, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was inside room 206 was growing restless, and I was its only witness. One freezing night, the storm had knocked out the generator, leaving the lodge in complete darkness. I decided to check room 206 again. The door, which had always been locked, was now slightly ajar. My heart pounded as I pushed it open, the cold air rushing out like a breath from another world. Inside, the room was unlike any other. The wallpaper was peeling, and the furniture was covered in dust and cobwebs. But what caught my eye were the strange markings on the walls, symbols I recognized from local Native American legends. They were scratched deep into the wood, smeared with what looked like dried blood. Scattered across the floor were bones, animal bones, I hoped, but some looked oddly human. There was also a shattered mirror, the shards reflecting flickers of light from the hall. Suddenly, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. Something darted behind the curtains, too fast to see clearly. I froze. Then came a sound, a low, guttural growl, barely a whisper, but filled with menace. I stumbled backward, my breath fogging in the cold air. That's when I noticed the window, broken, but with no sign of forced entry. How did whatever was inside get in? I slammed the door shut and locked it with trembling hands. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. The lodge had always felt haunted, but this was something darker, something alive and hungry. I couldn't stop thinking about the door, about what might be waiting inside when no one was looking. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The first disappearance happened on a bitterly cold night. Mary, one of the few guests brave enough to stay, vanished without a trace. Her bed was untouched, but the window to her room was cracked open, letting in the howling wind. I reported it to the local authorities, but the storm had turned the mountain roads into impassable walls of snow. Help wouldn't arrive anytime soon. The guests grew anxious, whispers of curses and mountain spirits spreading like wildfire. That night, I couldn't sleep. My dreams were invaded by pale eyes glowing in the dark, watching me from the woods beyond the lodge. I kept hearing faint footsteps echoing through the empty halls, but every time I checked, no one was there. The lodge, once just an old building, had become a trap, and whatever lurked here was no longer content to stay hidden. The creature was hunting, and I was its only witness. While searching the dusty archives in the basement, I stumbled upon an old photograph tucked between yellowed newspapers and faded ledgers. The photo was dated 1921 and showed a group of hotel employees standing proudly on the lodge's front steps. What caught my eye was the man at the center. His face was shockingly familiar. It was as if I was staring at a younger version of myself. Next to him stood a small boy, But this wasn't any ordinary child. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes were entirely black, void of any whites. The boy's smile was unnerving, stretched wide in a way that seemed unnatural. My heart pounded as I realized this photo wasn't just a piece of history. It was a warning. The lodge's past wasn't just a tale of old guests and weathered walls. It was deeply entwined with something inhuman. As I held the photo, a chill ran down my spine. How was I connected to this place? To that boy? Questions filled my mind, but the lodge was quiet, almost too quiet, like it was listening. That night, the weight of the hotel's dark history pressed down on me. I knew that understanding the past was the only way to survive what was coming. The nights grew darker, the air heavier. The Wendigo wasn't just a shadow lurking in the corners. It began to invade my mind. It whispered my name in voices that sounded like my mother, my childhood friends, even my own. Each word dripped with malice, a cruel mockery that sent shivers down my spine. One night, while checking the empty halls, I heard footsteps behind me, soft, deliberate. I turned, but no one was there. The temperature dropped suddenly, breath visible in the icy air. Then, a voice called out, clear and haunting, "Come back to me!" I wanted to run, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. The hotel itself seemed to pulse, alive with a sinister hunger. Doors slammed shut on their own. Lights flickered, and the shadows danced just beyond my sight. The Wendigo toyed with me, blurring the lines between reality and nightmare. I wasn't sure if I was awake or trapped in a dark dream. With the snowstorm cutting off all escape routes, I realized I was trapped, alone, hunted, and losing my grip on sanity. The generator faltered and died, plunging the lodge into complete darkness. I was alone in the lobby, every creak and whisper magnified by the silence. Then, from the shadows, it emerged. The Wendigo was unlike anything I'd imagined. Towering, gaunt, with skin like rotted bark, stretched taut over bones. Its eyes were sunken hollows, glowing faintly white. It moved with unnatural grace, silent yet menacing. It whispered my name again, a cold breath on my neck. Panic surged, but my limbs refused to obey. The creature stepped closer, revealing rows of jagged teeth, a hunger older than the mountains themselves. I stumbled back toward the staircase, heart hammering in my chest. The door to room 206 creaked open slowly behind me, as if inviting me in. I knew then I had no choice. The Wendigo wanted me to follow, to become part of whatever cursed secret that room held. With a final glance at the fading lights, I stepped through the doorway, surrendering to the darkness. I never intended to spend the night in room 206, but the Wendigo left me no choice. The door slammed shut behind me, sealing me in a chamber of decay and ancient terror. The walls seemed to pulse, breathing with a life of their own. Shadows writhed in the corners, whispering forgotten names. I could feel the creature's presence, watching, waiting just beyond the veil of darkness. I grasped the shards of the broken mirror from the floor, reflecting the faint moonlight that filtered through the cracked window. Suddenly, the symbols on the walls began to glow faintly, illuminating a grotesque scene, an ancient ritual, designed to trap and feed a creature of endless hunger. My mind raced. The Wendigo wasn't just a beast. It was a curse, bound to this place, feeding on fear, pain, and souls. As the night wore on, I understood that my fate was sealed. Either I became part of the curse, or I somehow survived to warn others. When dawn broke, the storm finally cleared. The lodge was silent again, the nightmare tucked away, until the next victim arrived. Story 2. My brother got lost in the Appalachian Mountains, but something came back wearing his face. 3 days. That's how long my brother was gone, swallowed by the dense, unforgiving wilderness of the Appalachian Mountains. When he finally stumbled back to the edge of our family's trail, his eyes were wide open, but there was no life behind them. Mom looked at him, and with a voice breaking under the weight of a terrible truth, whispered, "That's not my son." We grew up hiking these mountains, a tradition as old as the trees themselves. Me and my brother, we knew every bend, every creek. But that day, the forest swallowed him whole, and what came back wasn't who we remembered. At first, it seemed like a miracle. But miracles have a price here. Something in those woods waited for him, or maybe followed him home, wearing his skin like a mask. And that's when the nightmare truly began. When my brother walked back into our lives, something was clearly wrong. His eyes didn't blink, not once. His movements were slow, deliberate, like a puppet on strings. He avoided sunlight, staying in shadows as if the light burned him. He didn't recognize family photos or stories from our childhood. When I asked about the day he vanished, he'd stare blankly, unable to answer. It was as if his memories were wiped clean. We all noticed the small things too, the way he moved his head oddly, the way his voice sounded hollow and distant. At night, strange noises echoed outside our house, and he never seemed to hear them. It was clear the brother we knew wasn't back. Something else had taken his place. The house felt different after my brother returned. Small details began to unravel the fragile illusion that he was the same person. At night, whispers drifted through the trees, voices just beyond comprehension. They seemed to call his name, but also mine, like a sinister echo. Around the property, I found footprints, too large and oddly shaped. But what unnerved me most was how some prints appeared backward, as if whoever made them walked in reverse. It was impossible, yet undeniable. My brother's behavior only worsened. He no longer blinked, his gaze cold and unseeing. He avoided sunlight, often disappearing into the shadows of the house, or outside into the dense forest. When spoken to, his responses were hollow, as if reciting lines, rather than speaking from memory. One evening, I caught him staring at nothing, lips moving silently. A cold chill crept up my spine as I realized the presence in the house wasn't just my brother. It was something else, wearing his face, using his body. The tension built with each passing day, and I knew I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. The forest had claimed him, but not just him. It had brought something back. I knew I couldn't face this alone. Desperation pushed me to seek answers beyond the shadows that haunted my home. I spoke with locals, old-timers who whispered of disappearances, strange sightings, and unnatural forces lurking deep in the Appalachian woods. Their stories painted a terrifying picture. Creatures that wore human skin, spirits that mimicked voices, and ancient curses passed down through generations. Some warned me never to venture too deep, for the forest didn't forgive trespassers. I pored over dusty books and journals in the town's small library, searching for any record that could explain what had happened to my brother. I found cryptic mentions of skinwalkers and changeling spirits, entities that replaced lost souls with something dark and hungry. As the pieces fell into place, a chilling realization dawned. The thing in my brother's place wasn't just a ghost or hallucination. It was a predator, patient and cruel, hunting in the shadows. The line between myth and reality blurred, and I knew I had to confront the horror before it consumed everything I loved. One cold evening, I ventured deep into the forest, drawn by a strange pull I couldn't explain. The trees seemed to close in around me, whispers growing louder in the wind. After hours of searching, I stumbled upon something that chilled me to the bone. An altar made of bones, arranged in a circle beneath the towering pines. At the center lay a tattered, blood-stained shirt, the unmistakable shirt my brother wore the day he disappeared. My hands trembled as I reached out, the weight of the discovery sinking in. This was no accident or natural death. This was a ritual, an offering. Symbols etched into nearby stones glowed faintly in the moonlight, strange shapes that seemed to shift when I looked away. The forest around me pulsed with an unnatural energy, as if watching. In that moment, I understood. My brother's disappearance was tied to something ancient and dark, something that didn't just want to replace him, but to consume him. The altar was proof, the twisted heart of the nightmare that had invaded my family's life. Returning from the woods, my mind raced with dread and determination. The imposter had to be confronted, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. The house felt colder, shadows lengthened, and the air was thick with an unsettling silence. That night, as the wind howled outside, I found him, my brother's form, standing motionless in the living room, eyes unblinking and dark. His presence was heavy, unnatural. I spoke his name, watching for any flicker of recognition, but there was none. The creature hissed, a guttural sound that sent chills down my spine. It lunged, revealing twisted claws where hands should have been. I dodged, barely escaping as it smashed furniture and snarled in fury. I fought with everything I had, not just for myself, but for the memory of the real brother I once knew. The battle was brutal and primal, echoing through the old house like a storm. Finally, with a desperate move, I managed to trap the creature inside a circle of salt and sacred symbols I had prepared earlier, buying myself time. But even as it writhed and screamed, I realized this was not the end. After the creature was trapped, silence fell over the house like a heavy fog. My mother's eyes, filled with pain and fear, met mine. She pulled me close and whispered something that shattered what little hope I had left. "It wasn't him," she said softly, "but it's not the only one." Her words hung in the air, chilling and ominous. She told me about other disappearances, other families haunted by shadows wearing familiar faces. The forest, she explained, was alive with something ancient, an evil that fed on fear and took what it needed. The truth was darker than I could have imagined. The creature wasn't just a single imposter. It was part of a larger, terrifying presence lurking in the Appalachian wilderness. That night, I realized the fight wasn't just for my brother. It was for all of us. Days passed, but the terror never left. The house remained cold, shadows lurking just beyond the corners of my vision. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching, waiting. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind made my heart race. Sleep became a battleground. Nightmares blurred with reality, faces shifting in the dark, the imposter's hollow eyes staring back at me. I feared what might come if I let my guard down. The forest outside seemed to pulse with an unspoken menace. I knew deep down that this evil was patient, waiting for another chance to slip inside. I promised myself I would never forget the truth, and that I would warn others who dared to wander these mountains. If you've ever felt the weight of unseen eyes watching from the darkness, you're not alone. These mountains hide secrets far older and darker than we imagine. If this story unsettled you, imagine living it. Subscribe now and join a community that uncovers the darkest truths hidden in forgotten places. Share your own experiences in the comments, because sometimes the only way to fight the shadows is together. Stay alert, stay curious, and never ignore what lurks just beyond the light. Story 3. The secret cult that fed the Wendigo in the Bloodroot Ridge caves. Deep within the shadowed recesses of the Appalachian Mountains lies Bloodroot Ridge, a place whispered about in native legends, shrouded in darkness and forgotten by time. It was here that I, an archaeologist driven by curiosity and a hunger for the unknown, uncovered something that would change everything. It began with a routine survey. My team and I had been tracking ancient markers and folklore for months, trying to piece together fragments of a forgotten past. But nothing prepared us for what we found inside those forbidding caves. Nestled beneath a jagged rock formation, half buried in dirt and twisted roots, lay a human skull, deformed, fractured, and still stained with fresh blood. The smell was unmistakable. This was no ancient relic. It was a recent death, a grim testament to something lurking unseen. I reached out carefully, feeling a chill run down my spine. The skull's bite marks were unlike anything I'd seen, jagged and irregular, as if some monstrous jaw had crushed it only days ago. Questions flooded my mind. Who or what had been here? Was this an animal attack? Or something far worse? Our radios crackled as I called in the discovery, the gravity of the moment sinking in. Local legends had long spoken of a soul eater haunting Bloodroot Ridge, a Wendigo creature born of starvation and darkness, devouring flesh and sanity alike. Most dismissed it as myth, stories to scare children and tourists. But here, in my hand, was evidence that demanded reconsideration. As night fell, the caves seemed to close around us. Shadows danced. The silence thickened. Unease settled deep into my bones. This was no longer just an archaeological expedition. It was a descent into terror. I remember the sudden chill, that swept through the team when a faint chanting echoed from the deepest cavern. It was distant, almost hypnotic, yet impossibly real. We exchanged uneasy glances. None of us were prepared for what lay ahead. If you've ever been drawn to the unknown, the thrill and dread of uncovering secrets better left buried, I urge you to subscribe now. This story will pull you deeper into the darkness than you've ever dared to go. What we found next would challenge everything we believed and threaten to consume us all. The Bloodroot Ridge is not just a stretch of land. It's a name whispered with reverence and fear among locals and indigenous tribes alike. This ridge, tucked deep in the Appalachian Mountains, has been a site of strange occurrences and eerie tales for centuries. The native Cherokee people spoke of a creature they called the Wendigo, a soul eater born from hunger and dark spirits that roamed these woods, preying on the lost and unwary. Our team studied countless accounts, some dating back hundreds of years, of travelers who vanished without a trace, strange footprints found near the ridge, and unsettling noises that echoed through the night. The legend says the Wendigo is more than just a beast. It's a curse that twists the soul and feeds on human flesh. The cave systems of Bloodroot Ridge are vast and labyrinthine, filled with natural beauty and a sinister presence. Over time, many explorers ventured inside, never to return, their fates sealed by the unknown. Despite warnings, curiosity pulled us in. Local folklore wasn't just stories. It was a warning, a plea to respect the dark forces that dwell beneath the surface. As we prepared for our descent into the caves, I felt the weight of those warnings settle like a stone in my chest. But the real danger was yet to come. What we would face inside those walls would make even the oldest legends seem tame. We stepped into the cave's yawning mouth under a heavy canopy of fog and silence. The air grew colder with every step, thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient secrets. Our lights pierced the darkness, revealing jagged walls adorned with faded red markings, symbols we later learned were warnings etched by native shamans long ago. The descent was treacherous. Loose stones shifted beneath our boots, and eerie echoes bounced off the narrow passageways. We felt watched, eyes unseen tracking our every move. As hours passed, strange sounds began, faint whispers, low chants, almost as if the cave itself breathed with a dark rhythm. That night, deep within the labyrinth, we found the first sign that we were not alone. On a cavern wall, painted in dried blood, was the unmistakable shape of a monstrous figure, antlers crowning a twisted face. Surrounding it were strange symbols, like a ritualistic language, warning us of what lurked beyond. Our team's unease grew. The cave was no mere geological formation. It was a sacred prison, a ritual site where dark forces had been summoned and fed for generations. We pressed on, torn between the desire for discovery and the instinct to flee. But the mysteries of Bloodroot Ridge were far from finished. The cave's oppressive darkness seemed to grow heavier with every step, swallowing light and hope alike. What began as a scientific expedition was quickly unraveling into a nightmare none of us could have predicted. It started subtly, the faintest absence here, a missing piece there, but soon it became impossible to ignore. Members of our team were vanishing without a trace. At first, it was Jeremy. We were mapping a narrow passage when he paused to examine some ancient markings. I looked back a moment later, and he was gone. No sound, no warning, just an empty space where he'd stood. Panic set in, and we called his name repeatedly, voices bouncing hollowly off the stone walls. No answer. Our radios crackled with static, the only companion to our rising dread. We searched for hours, calling and shouting, but the cave swallowed our voices, as well as our friends. One by one, others disappeared. Sarah near a cold underground stream, Mark close to a cavern opening we'd barely noticed, and even Lucas, who had been our strongest and most cautious member. The air grew colder, sharp as knives, chilling us to the bone. An eerie silence followed each disappearance, broken only by the faint, ghastly whispers we could no longer deny hearing. It felt as if something was watching, waiting, and manipulating the very shadows around us. We tried retracing our steps, marking the walls with chalk, leaving signs of our path, but the passages twisted and shifted like a living maze, as if the cave itself was rearranging. What was once a familiar route became unrecognizable, disorienting us deeper into the darkness. Fear became a constant companion, squeezing the air from our lungs. Some whispered about curses, others about spirits, but I clung to reason until I found the footprints. Not human, elongated, clawed impressions, pressed into the soft mud near the cave's edge, leading into tunnels none dared follow. It was then that I realized we were being hunted. The Wendigo wasn't just legend, it was real, stalking us in these tunnels, feeding on our fear, our flesh. I remember the moment I saw the creature, or what I thought was the creature, a twisted shadow, darting just beyond our light. It moved with unnatural speed, too tall, too thin, and eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. My breath caught in my throat. Our group was shattered. The terror was no longer something we studied. It had become our predator. Yet, with desperation as our only ally, we pressed onward, determined to find a way out, or to uncover the truth that had drawn us here. This was no longer an expedition. It was a fight for survival, and the cave was a trap with no easy escape. The shadows deepened as we stumbled toward a discovery that would change everything and force us to confront the dark heart of Bloodroot Ridge itself. After the terrifying disappearances, we stumbled upon a hidden chamber deeper within the caves, an eerie sanctuary that bore unmistakable signs of ritual. The walls were covered in cryptic symbols, bloodstains, and faded drawings depicting a monstrous figure with antlers, devouring human figures. Candles, long extinguished, lay scattered, their wax hardened into grotesque shapes. This was no accident. It was clear that a secret cult had been using these caves for generations, feeding the Wendigo with sacrifices to appease or control it. Their methods were cruel and deliberate, human lives offered in dark ceremonies to keep the creature sated, to prevent it from ravaging the nearby communities. We found remnants of bone altars, twisted effigies made from animal parts, and ancient texts written in a mix of indigenous symbols and Latin, describing rituals to summon and bind the Wendigo's spirit. The cult's beliefs blurred the lines between myth and reality, faith and terror. The gravity of what we uncovered was crushing. This wasn't just a legend preserved in stories. It was an active nightmare that had been lurking beneath the surface, hidden in plain sight. The blood on the cave floor was fresh, the ritual site recently used. As we documented the chamber, a low growl echoed from deeper tunnels. The air thickened with menace. It was a chilling reminder that whatever controlled the Wendigo, or the Wendigo itself, was still awake and watching us. Our mission transformed. We weren't just archaeologists anymore. We were witnesses to a dark secret that begged for exposure, but threatened death to anyone who dared reveal it. With this knowledge, we had to decide: flee and forget what we had found, or face the darkness head-on and try to stop the horror from spreading beyond Bloodroot Ridge. Armed with our grim discovery, we ventured deeper into the caves, hearts pounding with dread, but driven by a need for answers. The air grew colder, heavier, almost suffocating. Every step echoed against the stone, yet an unsettling silence prevailed, as if the cave itself held its breath. Ahead, the narrow passage opened into a vast cavern, lit faintly by phosphorescent fungi clinging to the walls. Shadows danced, cast by our flickering lanterns, twisting into shapes that teased the edges of sanity. Suddenly, from the darkness emerged a towering figure, skeletal and elongated, crowned with grotesque antlers. Its eyes burned with a terrible hunger, and a guttural growl rumbled through the chamber. This was the Wendigo, the embodiment of every nightmare whispered through Appalachian lore. The creature moved with unnatural speed and terrifying grace. We scattered, hearts hammering as we fought to keep sight of it. Its breath reeked of decay. Its presence was an unbearable weight, pressing down on us all. Desperation fueled our courage. Using every scrap of knowledge from the cult's texts, we attempted a ritual to banish or bind the creature. The air crackled with dark energy as chants echoed, but the Wendigo's rage only intensified, shaking the cavern with a howl that seemed to split the very rock. The battle was primal, a fight not just for survival, but for the souls caught in this ancient curse. As the ritual climaxed, a blinding light burst forth, and the creature screamed in agony before vanishing into the darkness. Silence returned, heavy but relieved. We were battered, shaken, but alive. Yet, as we caught our breath, an unnerving realization settled over us. The Wendigo was gone, for now. The curse lingered, and Bloodroot Ridge remained a place where shadows moved and horrors waited. The cavern fell silent after the Wendigo vanished, but the weight of what we had faced clung to us like a second skin. We emerged from Bloodroot Ridge shaken, our bodies bruised and our minds haunted. The experience had left scars far deeper than any wound. Back in the world above, we tried to return to normalcy, but nothing was the same. Nightmares plagued our sleep, visions of the creature's glowing eyes, and the cold, empty hunger that had consumed so many. The forest seemed alive with unseen eyes, whispering secrets we dared not fully comprehend. We reported our findings to local authorities and historians, but skepticism and silence were our only responses. The cult's influence, though diminished, still shadowed the region. Some believed it was a myth. Others feared it was a truth too terrible to confront. I often wonder if our ritual truly banished the Wendigo, or merely sent it into a deeper slumber. The caves remain closed, yet the stories persist. Tales of strange howls echoing through the night, livestock found mutilated, and shadows glimpsed at the forest's edge. The Wendigo is not just a monster of legend. It is a lingering darkness, a warning etched into the heart of the Appalachians, and Bloodroot Ridge holds its secrets tightly, waiting for the next curious soul to stumble too close. If you feel a chill tonight, remember this: some monsters are real, and some places are better left undisturbed. Emerging from the darkness of Bloodroot Ridge, I carry with me not just memories, but a warning. The Wendigo is more than folklore. It embodies the primal fear lurking in the Appalachian wilderness. Our encounter exposed the thin veil separating myth from reality, and the peril in disturbing what should remain hidden. This story is a testament to the enduring power of ancient legends and their relevance in modern times. It challenges us to respect the unknown and heed the silent warnings whispered through generations. If you've ever felt the chilling presence of something unseen or heard the haunting calls of the wild at night, you're not alone. These tales bind us together through fear, curiosity, and the unending quest to understand what lies beyond our comprehension. Thank you for joining me on this harrowing journey to explore more stories that blur the lines between history and horror. Hit subscribe and tap the notification bell. Your support helps keep these legends alive. And remember, some doors, once opened, never truly close. Stay vigilant and stay curious.